All right, cool. Well, I'm Jason Jackson. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Roderick Threets. I don't introduce myself well. Right now, I'm currently running for vice chair for the state
I
party.
saw that.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
I was a former candidate for Salt Lake County Council before, so.
All right. So before we get started, I just kind of want to outline the problem. We're here to debate SB54. I mean, you know this, but figure the audience.
Right.
Also, count my vote and the differences and benefits between that and the caucus convention system. Basically, whether or not we should keep SB54, change it, or get rid of it entirely. That's kind of the scope of the debate. And the goal is to achieve an electoral system that is going to best represent what the citizens want. And of course, my opinion is that the caucus convention system does that. So that's the position I'm going to take, and then we'll debate that.
All right.
So I guess I'll go ahead and start. So the goal, as I said, is to achieve a system that's going to most closely reflect what the people truly want. And I think the primary system doesn't do that for a couple of reasons. First of all, we look at like the approval rating of Congress. It's at 15%.
Right.
But you compare that to the incumbency rate, which is over 90%. In general, incumbents don't ever get ousted. Part of the problem here is actually gerrymandering. Mm-hmm. So the country is pretty evenly divided, Democrat versus Republican. And you can see that in the presidential elections. Trump won, but the actual vote is very close.
Right.
It's not a huge difference in percentage. And in fact, Trump won the electoral college but lost the popular vote.
Right.
So it's a quite a narrow band, and yet, despite the country being so evenly divided, approximately 50% of elections are not competitive, and that's because you have Republican districts and you have Democrat districts.
Right. Yeah.
And the obvious comparison would be Utah versus California.
Right.
Utah is not competitive for Democrats.
Right.
California is not competitive for Republicans.
Right.
And this creates a situation where it's very hard to remove an incumbent in a general election. 50% of your incumbents just cannot lose a general election.
Right.
So they have to be beaten in a primary if they're going to be removed.
Right.
And that's where primaries need to become competitive. So I think there's a couple problems with standard elections. First of all, our satisfaction rate with Congress is 15%, which implies we're really unhappy with them.
Right.
And yet their incumbency rate has not dropped.
Right.
So that's an issue. And I believe that comes about because of the enormous advantages incumbents have in a primary. A primary seeks to get everybody involved directly, and one of the problems there is you are simply limited due to time and resources. You cannot transfer as much information to 250,000 people as you can to 1,000 people.
Right.
It's just a question of money. To send out advertisements to reach 250,000 people, especially when you don't know who they are. So So in 2016, Utah had 250,000 people participate in the GOP primary and vote for governor. 280,000 people participated in the caucus. So the numbers of participants between the two are approximately the same.
Right.
But you've got 250,000 people spread out among almost 3 million. So to find those 250,000 and present to them information,
Right.
it's very difficult, and it's very costly. And that's where the incumbents have the advantage, because they can raise money, significant amounts of money,
Right.
compared to a primary challenger who may have to bankroll his whole thing with, a couple $1,000 out of his own pocket,
Right.
maybe a few $100s in donations. The idea that a challenger like that could even come close to having a fair shake against an incumbent
Right.
is just silly. And I think the results of a 15% approval rate and a 90% incumbency rate, I think that reflects that reality.
Right.
So the opposite approach is to say, okay, well, another way to go about it is to narrow the number of people we have to inform, but have them be well informed. And so that's the trade-off. You have 250,000 people voting on very limited information versus 1,000 people who, well, there's 4,000 delegates, 1,000 in a congressional district.
Right.
So if we're talking about a congressional district, it's 1,000 people voting,
Mm-hmm.
but on a lot of information.
Right.
And I think the second is superior. And the reason I think that is, you look at, so you can see videos online of people doing what are essentially pranks. They go around to do, they knock on doors and do surveys or, sign petitions for some ridiculous thing. Like the last one I saw was sign this petition to increase the inflation rate to 100%.
Right.
Destroy
the
the
people
American
just signing anyway. Yeah,
and,
I've seen those.
and the point the video makers make, which I think they're wrong about, is that, oh, people are stupid. Well, that's not true.
No.
What's actually happening is people are being forced to make a decision with limited time and limited information.
Yep.
And the information is all biased in one direction.
Right.
So they get the information that the person wants to give them.
Right.
And they hear no other side. And then they have to make a choice.
Right.
Well, with that's actually exactly what happens in a primary.
Right.
The incumbent gets to give people information. The challenger has almost no access due to his lack of money.
Right.
So people will make a decision based only on the advertisements, 30-second ads on the radio or 30-second ad or those little flyers
Right.
with a few bullet points. And that's all they will have to make a choice, because that's all you have time and money for, and to do more is just prohibitively expensive. But in a caucus convention system, because we select representatives and we say, all right, well, it's too expensive to have 250,000 people get a lot of information, but we could have 1,000 people get a lot of information. They can all sit down with a congressman, ask questions, and do research. And the beautiful thing about it is, once you've narrowed it to 1,000 people, money is no longer an issue.
Right.
People keep complaining about money in politics. Well, a caucus removes it.
Right.
So once money is no longer an issue, anyone can challenge and be competitive.
Mm-hmm.
And we have evidence of that in the loss of Bob Bennett to Mike Lee.
Mm-hmm.
So Bob Bennett lost in the caucus. That's where he lost. And he was an incumbent. He'd been around a long time. And in fact, SB54, the law, was put in place right after that election. And I'm pretty certain it was put in because of that election. If you watch the Senate debates for SB54, one of the Democrats actually said that. He said, look, this is not my party. I have nothing, I have no dog in this race. But it looks to me like this is a law intended to protect incumbents from being ousted.
Right.
And that was a Democrat that said that, wasn't a Republican. And that appears to me to be what it is. because incumbents have such an advantage in primaries, they wanted to be able to force a primary to protect incumbents. I don't think that's the correct thing to do. I think we should not protect incumbents, because looking at our dissatisfaction rate with Congress, it's obvious that incumbents, as a rule, are not doing a good job.
Right.
So I think Bennett getting beaten was the correct result that reflected best the will of the people. Now, that's a guess. Just because Congress in general has a low rating doesn't mean Bennett himself
Right.
had one. So I'm guessing a bit on that. And we will have to guess somewhat, because we can't actually give...
There's no research that's actually
Well,
done on it. So.
yeah, because the result we're trying to get to is, what would an election give us if everybody had the same access to information that those 1,000 selected people have, and then they all voted? That's the real result that we're trying to achieve. The primary approaches that by letting everybody vote, but vote on limited information. And then the caucus tries to achieve that by having essentially a sample of everybody. But they get all the information. And I think having all the information, but only a sample of the voters, is, especially where that sample is selected by the voters themselves. It's not selected by any government agency. It's the voters choose their representatives.
Right.
And I think that is the superior method. So my suggestion is that SB54 should be repealed, and we should go back to a strict caucus system. And that's going to hurt the incumbents, which is why they put SB54 in place, in my opinion. And they won't like it, but that I think they shouldn't like it. Their approval rating indicates to me that we shouldn't be doing something that they like.
Right.
So with that, that's kind of my opening statement. Go ahead and make yours.
Well, my thing is, I've lived all over the country, and I've been a county and state delegate everywhere I've been, everywhere I've moved, and I've lived in states that has the caucus system. I have states that have the dual path in place. I think having a dual path is okay, right? It actually, let me go back a minute. Alexander Hamilton said, stay engaged and stay informed, right? So the dual path, the signature route, right, actually gets people that are not well known in the face of voters in the neighborhood, which is a good thing, right? Because that's what you want. I mean, granted, it's limited money, but it's free to walk. Right. It's free to walk for you, so you're in the face of voters all the time, right? If you're, if you're legitimate, you're in the face of voters, and you're talking to people, telling them your platform, and they get the information from the horse's mouth, which is good, right? On the flip side of that, goes back to the money issue with that, right? I mean, you have some. So it didn't have to be an incumbent. It could be any random person. He has $1 million to drop on a campaign. He's out there on billboards, flyers, whole 9 yards, and it kind of defeats the purpose, right? Because I think we have become more of a populist society. So obviously the person with the flashier money is, they're going to see that and say, oh, this guy's everywhere, because, and they relate the money to the situation, which makes it bad. On the other side of the coin, with the caucus convention system, I'm very familiar with it, right? And that gives a chance for somebody like a nobody like me in this state. When I ran for county council, I met all the county delegates face to face, and you know what? I can tell you honestly, I probably spent $700 on my whole campaign, and I reached all these people, which is good, right? And that's that's what we need. So as I see both sides. Like I said before, I'm kind of in the middle on it, because I see both sides and the purpose of both sides, but the other side can be influenced by money, and that really, the underdog is he's just washed right out on the storm. Now, as far as the caucus system is concerned, What we did in Florida when I was the vice chair for the Teenage Republicans, and I was assisting the Young Republicans. The state delegates actually had to sit down in their neighborhoods with the neighbors. They had, voter registration. They knew who voted Republican, and they invited these people out to libraries, things like that. Hey, let's discuss the candidates, that's running that's running Republican. That's going to be coming up in the caucus. We don't really have that, like, that go-getter kind of mentality. And that right there, because, it is, it's grassroots. So if you have a county delegate in your community, that county delegate needs to go out talking to the people that votes Republican, the ones that vote independent, even the unaffiliated voters. Might even drop a little, telling them, hey, you know what, I have some information for you. Let's go meet at the library.
Right.
And that will ultimately strengthen the system. Now, we can have the dual path. Let's just say we have the dual path is in place because it's law, right? But if these delegates are going out here talking to their people, that washes SB54.
Right.
Because they're like, okay, hey, they voted me in as county delegate, state delegate. This is what the deal is with these guys or women or what have you, and it completely subverts SB54. So I think at the delegate level, need to be more engaged because they are the most informed. So if they're engaged with their neighborhoods, with their districts, then I don't care who comes through the primary with $1 million. Hey, my county delegate said this guy's a creep.
Right.
And then that ends the whole thing. So I think, we like I said, we can keep SB54. We can keep it per se for this instance. Mm-hmm. But we have the delegates go out and have meetings in their neighborhoods with the assistance of the county party or the state party where they need help from to get that done. But obviously the data is going to come from the county or state party. Right. And the delegates need to go out instead of just being a delegate and going and voting, because the thing is, people in your neighborhood, like, I was a state delegate, right, so I live in Midville 17, and it was just instinct for me to, because I can get the voter data, all that stuff, and I went out and talked to people in my neighborhood and say, what do you think about, Mitt Romney and Mike Kennedy and, Sam Parker, and I talked to people, just randomly, and, they had their opinions, and that's how I voted in the convention, because that's what the people in my area wanted. It shouldn't be just my vote. I'm just representing you. It's a representative government, all the way down to the bottom.
Right.
So if the delegates aren't engaged with the community, then yes, the other side of SB54, the signature path, will win every single time. So I'll go back to the SB54 argument, right? I've done my own research on SB54, and it is darn near borderline unconstitutional. Is the language, the way they have it written, doesn't lean that way. That's why the 10th Circuit keeps voting against the repeal, because of the wording of SB54. Leans it just right above unconstitutional. Like, it's like right there. I've had my lawyer friend, he's a constitutional lawyer back in Jacksonville, he looked at it for me and he was like, dude, they wrote this and they wrote it good. They wrote it good.
Just skirting.
Exactly, and that's the problem. So we have to really get into that. If we want to repeal it, we need to get into the document and find out where the language is, and then we need to have the correct interpretation of the First Amendment.
Right.
On that, because that's where they're bouncing heads up there, right, on that. So, personally, like I said, I see both sides, and I see the value in both sides. But as you say, back to your point about California, everybody and their mother is jumping in primaries, big money. Look at Maxine Waters, Nancy Pelosi, all these guys. They've been in office since what? The Feinstein. She's been in office since like the 90s. Right. With the same rubbish year after year after year. And it's like, when are y'all gonna switch the game up? Yeah. But at the same time, it's it's a liberal state. It's I should say liberal. I can't even think of the word past liberal. How far left they are? They're just like over the cliff left, right? And like here in Utah, we're right. We're over the cliff right. Right. Democrats don't have a chance here. Very seldom, because this climate here, we have a lot of moderates on both sides. Right. So people tend to lean either way, depending on if they like the person or the policy, etc. Now, like states like Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, they'll never ever be blue. Well, Alabama went blue with the Senate seat, right? But they're Republican dominated.
Right.
So, so it's, I don't know, it's nice. It's a tough one, man, because it's just, both sides have value, but both sides need work.
Yeah.
And like I said, we need to, if we go to save the caucus convention system, we need the delegates to do more to inform their community, to subvert that.
Like have delegate meetings similar to the way we had meetings with the candidates.
Exactly.
Delegates,
yes.
but have the delegates go out
Mm-hmm.
and hold meetings in their local library.
Exactly.
So people can come and find out,
informed.
hey, what did you learn from the candidates?
Right, and then what that does too, if we can get the candidates to, not the candidates, oh my, the delegates to do that, right? It'll make people want to go to the caucuses every year, no matter if it's an off year or presidential year. Like, oh man, this guy came in here and talked to us, maybe I want to do that too.
Right.
And you have more turnout in precincts. Like our turnout at the caucus at West Jordan, ours was at West Jordan. In my precinct, there was only, everybody got a position. Mm-hmm. That's how many people were there. That was it. That was like bare bones minimum. Some of them only had 2. Like, people are just, they just don't want to be
apathetic.
Yeah, they don't want to be involved, and it's a shame.
Yeah.
That more people aren't involved in the caucus process because they get that direct contact.
And I think to that point, part of the apathy, I think, comes from the non-competitive nature of the general elections.
Right.
And that's happening in so many places.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just Utah.
Right.
I mean, Utah and California, it's obvious why they're not competitive.
Right.
But you actually have uncompetitive districts in states that are normally competitive.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because of the gerrymandering you get. Basically, both parties want it because they want their own seat to be secure.
Mm-hmm.
So they always gerrymander it so, District 1 will be Democrat, 2 and 3 will be Republican.
Right.
And so on. And they all want it to be safe. And because of that trend, you get these uncompetitive races. And I think in an uncompetitive race, the feeling by the voter, and this is just a guess on my part, but I think the feeling by the voter is, well, I'm just going to get the Republican anyway, because that's what my district always votes for. So, what's the point in getting involved? And I think you're right that delegate meetings where they can get involved in the primary by actually meeting a delegate and finding things out, I think that would go a long way to fixing that. But I have a second solution I would suggest for that as well. So Democrats are not going to be competitive in Utah, other than District 4. I think,
right, because that's a swing district. District 4 is a swing district, definitely.
So 4 is a swing district, although in the last, and I don't know how people feel about this, but in the last census we redistricted. That's why District 3 hits all the way down to like Moab now.
Right. Yep. It gives that little.
So District 3 is this big long string that basically follows would that be Highway 6 down past Price to Moab. And the reason they did that was to make District 4 more Republican, because they stuck a bunch of Utah County and what was District 3 into District 4 because those areas are heavily Republican. And they basically wanted to split up Salt Lake County and add a little bit of Salt Lake County because Salt Lake County is the most heavily
Southern
Democrat.
Salt Lake County at that,
Yeah.
which is mainly Republican anyway.
Yeah. And so the districting that we have right now was basically created to split all the Democrats up between the 4 districts so that they wouldn't have chance in anyone.
Right. And I'm all about fairness too. I mean, we do maybe need to redo lines just to make it fair for everyone. You know, I mean, granted, yes, we want Republicans office. That's the bottom line. But at the same time, you know, when you gerrymander, you're defeating the purpose of the republic. You're creating a democracy is what you're doing. And then we know democracy, you know, old Madison said the democracy is equal to the republic. So it's...
And so I think the way to counter that is to basically penalize, and I think there's a penalty you could put on gerrymandering, and a penalty you could put on people for arranging non-competitive districts.
Right.
And that penalty is called ranked alternative voting. So in a ranked alternative vote, what you do is use like say there's 3 candidates, and in fact, let's see. Well, let's use the presidential election, just by theory. Well, we had 3 candidates. So Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, and what was the Libertarian? The one I wanted was Austin Peterson, but well, let's just say it was Austin Peterson.
Yeah.
It wasn't. It was a former governor from Arizona. I forget his name. Anyway, so let's say Austin Peterson was the Libertarian. That's who I wish the Libertarians had ran. He was pretty good. So whenever you have more than 2 candidates, you have what you call a spoiled election, which means if you vote for the 3rd place candidate, your vote really didn't count. It got thrown away because it's the top 2 that are at play.
Right.
And if you didn't vote for one of them, your vote didn't count.
Right.
So libertarians typically get around 2%.
Right.
1.5%, something like that. So let's say I like Austin Peterson best. In fact, I did. He didn't end up winning his party nomination, so he wasn't in, but he ran. If I vote for Austin Peterson, I'm 99% sure that my vote doesn't count because libertarians never get very much.
Right.
And then I've got Trump versus Clinton, and I've got very definite ideas of who I don't want, which is I really didn't like Clinton. So if I throw my vote away, I'm potentially, I'm basically abstaining in a race where I have
a stake,
a very passionate opinion. And so what happens is that people vote strategically. They won't vote for the one they actually want. They will vote against the one they dislike. Right. So I didn't like Hillary Clinton the most, so I voted against her for Trump.
Right.
Now, in the actual election, Austin Peterson wasn't running, but if he had been, the one I would have wanted to vote for would be Peterson.
Right.
But I couldn't vote for him because I have to vote against Hillary Clinton. Well, ranked alternative voting, instead of voting for a person, what you do is you say, this person is my favorite, Austin Peterson is my favorite, he's my first choice.
Right.
And then Donald Trump is my second choice. And now what happens is you count up the votes and you take the bottom 2. So in this case, at least in Utah, that would have been Hillary Clinton versus Austin Peterson.
Right.
Because, Peterson's a libertarian, wouldn't have gotten very many votes. Clinton was a Democrat, in Utah she wouldn't get very many votes.
Right.
So then you take the bottom 2 and you actually do a runoff between the 2. And you just take all of the votes and you take out Donald Trump. You say, okay, he doesn't count. This is a direct runoff between Clinton and Peterson. And any vote that ranks Peterson higher than Clinton counts for Peterson. And any vote that ranks Clinton higher than Peterson counts for Clinton. And then you just count those up. Whoever won wins.
Goes against.
The loser gets eliminated. After you've eliminated that person, everybody who voted for that person, their vote will cascade to their second choice. And then you'll have a one-on-one vote where nobody's vote got thrown away, and it'll be between the top 2 candidates. Now in Utah, that would almost certainly have been Peterson versus Trump instead of
Right.
Clinton versus Trump.
Right.
But that's the thing. In Utah, Democrats aren't competitive. In fact, there are counties in Utah where Barack Obama got single-digit percentages.
Mm-hmm.
Was it Juab County? I don't remember. Anyway, it was northeast Utah, out
Okay.
in
They're going out
by
like Box
Heber.
Elder way.
Yeah, Box Elder
Yeah.
or Heber or something like that.
Right.
But also there were counties down south that did the same.
Right.
So there were counties in Utah where Democrats got 8%. You know, where's the voters' drive to be involved at that point?
Right.
But if you can have ranked alternative voting, now there's a competition between Republicans and a third party that is suited to Utah. Because the two-party system, I think, is spoiling our politics a lot.
I agree.
And partly, I mean, I don't think the Democrats should have to change their platform. I mean, I don't like their platform, obviously, or I would be a
Oh,
Democrat.
yeah, you're right.
But there are people that like that platform.
Mm-hmm.
They should have a party that represents them.
Right.
But at the same time, it's not competitive. It should, in Utah, it shouldn't be a competition between Republicans and Democrats because Democrats aren't competitive. It should be a competition between Republicans and either a farther right party
Mm-hmm. Right.
or a slightly more moderate party,
Right.
depending on what would be more competitive.
Right.
And my guess would be a more centrist party, slightly right of center, but left of the GOP
Mm-hmm.
would be actually the way to compete with the GOP in Utah. But you could also go farther right than Utah and compete there.
Yeah, you could.
So the Libertarian Party is further right than the GOP on some issues.
Right.
They're actually further left on other issues.
Right.
So they're actually well suited. I think the Libertarian Party would be
Right. Now,
competitive.
funny you would mention that because if we go back, let's go back to late '60s, right? Nelson Rockefeller. He was a liberal Republican. He was one of the last of his kind, right? He was that guy that was left of where the GOP was, a little more center, right?
Mhm.
But he didn't lean, more liberal. He was more liberal on social issues, things like that, right? And we come down the line, right? President Jimmy Carter, he was a conservative Democrat.
Right.
Like, where do you see that anymore? You don't see the ideologies in both parties anymore, and
Right.
that's what really, after Reagan was, I consider Reagan, I love Reagan. I considered him to be more of a moderate to closer liberal Republican because of some of his policies, but at least the two parties were competitive then, right? And it was okay to be a conservative and be a Democrat. It was okay, right? But when first Bush got in office, that's when everything went haywire. Everybody went to their corners.
Right.
Is what happened. And the Democrat platform changed. Ours changed slightly, a little bit, but theirs changed to a whole nother level.
Right.
After that happened. And I think that was the product of the Southern strategy, right? When that happened. Because I grew up during that time as the backlash of the Southern strategy happened in Florida. And the people's values in the South changed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the South now votes Republican, because their values changed.
Right.
And the Democrat platform went the other way. It literally left them, per se. I wouldn't say that. It left them, and they started voting Republican. But, we need, coming down the road here in the present, we need, as Republicans, right, we need to not shun the moderates.
Right.
If a liberal Republican wants to join our party, you believe in our platform?
Yeah.
Okay. We need to open the tent up.
Yeah. Even if it's, sometimes you got to say, well, do you believe in some of our platform, and we'll work on that together.
Right, exactly.
We'll go our separate ways on some points.
Exactly, and that's what Reagan did. Reagan did the big tent, and we need that because, see, here's the problem that we have now, and this is going back to the SB54 issue, right? There is 371,000 unaffiliated voters in the state of Utah right now, right? Looking at the last elections, I'm taking the Salt Lake County election, for example. 27% voted in the county council election against Jim Bradley last time. 27%. What does that tell you?
Not a lot of participation.
No, people are not getting involved.
Right.
You know what I mean? And people feel disenfranchised. And just going back to your comment about the ranked alternative. Yeah, ranked alternative, right? They're thinking their vote doesn't count because they're throwing their vote away on this guy or this one, and they don't think their vote matters at that point.
Right.
So we need to open that tent up and say, hey, you can be a liberal Republican.
Right.
Come on over.
And I think ranked alternative would do that.
Yeah.
And the reason is, so ranked alternative, what it does is eliminates the spoiler effect.
Right.
Which means I can vote third party, and just on an outside chance, like, okay, libertarians, he only ever got like 2% of the vote.
Right.
But I can take a chance on him and
still
still hedge
vote
my
count.
bets and say, okay, well, he's probably going to lose. If he does, my vote will go Republican.
Right, exactly.
And the nice thing about that is, as people are allowed to take a chance on a third party, suddenly the Republican Party has to worry about third parties.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to start worrying, what if a third party comes in and makes a play for all those moderates?
Right.
Well, we better make a play for them first.
Exactly.
We better, like you say, widen our tent, invite them in, and make them feel welcome. Because if we don't, okay, the Democrats aren't going to win in Utah. But what about the Libertarian Party?
Right.
If we focus only on our base and don't appeal to anybody else,
exactly.
What if the Libertarian Party or the Constitution Party or there's a party that
United Utah Party?
United Utah, yeah, that's the one. What if they come in and appeal to part of our base?
Right.
And then the unaffiliated voters.
And part of the Democrat base.
And if they're hitting the middle, the Democrats will rank them second. The Democrats will like them more than the Republicans.
That's right.
And they could actually, a party could create a coalition that represents more Utahns.
Right.
But just maybe slightly left of the GOP.
Right.
Or potentially to the right of the GOP.
Right.
But one of the things this does is it penalizes the gerrymandering. Because if you gerrymander a district so it's not competitive between you and the Democrats, whichever way you do it, I mean, it's a Democrat district or it's a Republican district, you've actually opened yourself up for somebody to play to the right of you. So a Republican district is not competitive between Republicans and Democrats.
Right.
But it would be competitive between Republicans and somebody to the right of Republicans.
Right.
In fact, they could be very competitive.
Right.
And the same on the Democrat side. You gerrymander a district so it's pure Democrat and Republicans have no chance. Well, now the Green Party has a chance, or the Socialist Party has a chance.
Right.
And they can beat you because the Democrat Party, the National Democrat Party, and the National Republican Party, they are actually constrained to not go that far left or right.
Right.
Because they do have to be a national party. So when you create these localized gerrymandered districts that are extreme right or extreme left, you actually open yourself up to a local party who can move that far right or
exactly.
left, and then out-Republican you or out-Democrat you.
Yeah. We're just out-independent you, period. That's just right.
So they can out extreme you.
Right.
Because they don't have to be competitive in every state. They just have to be competitive
right where they are.
Right here. and you created those conditions. So I think that would penalize gerrymandering, and people would still do it, but maybe not as much, because they would be worried about making a district too extreme to the point where they can't actually compete anymore,
Right.
because the district is so far right or left that any national party would just not be competitive.
Right.
So I think gerrymandering would ease up a little bit under that.
Right.
And then the competitiveness between like the GOP and the Libertarians, and I think actually Libertarians have an interesting position because they're farther right on some issues, but more centrist or left on others.
Right.
So I think the Libertarian Party could potentially compete with both Republicans and Democrats.
They could, yeah.
In different districts. And that competition, if third parties were allowed by eliminating the spoiler effect and having a ranked alternative voting system, if third parties are competitive, I think that also helps to bring people back to be active, to be involved, because suddenly their vote matters again.
Right.
And it may not matter between the Republicans and Democrats, but it matters between the Republicans and the Libertarians. And people will have an opinion on that and say, well, I like this one better, I like that one better.
Right.
And suddenly their vote matters again. And frankly, it gives a voice to moderates in Utah, where now, I'm not a moderate, and I don't want moderate candidates.
Right.
But they should have a voice. They're
Right.
Utahns too.
Right.
And it gives them a way of saying, well, I like this third party better, but I'll vote Republican as a second choice.
Right.
And that option, I think, gets people involved, impels the Republican Party to put up better candidates,
Right.
and to appeal to a wider base. And I think all of those are good outcomes. So I think ranked alternative voting actually is the solution that SB54 was hoped to be. SB54, I think they primarily put that in place to protect incumbents. But a lot of the people that support SB54 don't support it for that reason. They support it for the reason that they want more voter participation, they want more choice,
Right.
they want more involvement.
Which is the good side of that situation.
Yeah.
But then,
And I think ranked alternative voting is the solution that SB54 isn't. SB54, I don't think, achieves those things.
Right.
Partly because it empowers people with money to just stay as
Right.
incumbents forever.
Exactly.
And whereas ranked alternative will actually make it easier to oust incumbents, which I see as a good thing. Granted, in Utah, it'll be easier to beat Republicans, so I can see why the two major parties don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they need to suck it up and take one for the team.
Right. And then say that, and like I said, with the caucus system, it's the same thing, right? I mean, we need to empower the delegates to get involved in their community.
Right.
Because, I mean, you're an elected official now. You're an elected official at this point. You need to be engaged with your neighborhood. And that, too, can go into their ranked alternative voting also, right? That'll help influence that also. But if we don't have that under the current circumstances, we need to empower the delegates to save the caucus system.
Right.
That's going to be the one thing that saves it, because the lawsuit for SB54, that's not going away. I have some reservations about the monetary issue that comes to that. But if we're going to save, I think it's going to be easier for us to save the caucus convention system if we empower the delegates and keep throwing money at the lawsuit.
Right.
Because the thing is, Bateman, he's given a lot to the party.
Mm-hmm.
And I gave him his props for that. But the problem is, when does the money run out? He's not a money well.
Right.
When does the money run out? And then does this guy's business go under because he's helping us fund this lawsuit? I mean, as a conservative, most conservatives I think should agree, like, we shouldn't push that man to keep giving us money for this lawsuit. We need to go find other donors if we can, right? But to push this man's business into the ground, I don't know that man's business, his financial business, but I would feel awful if he spent his money into this and he lost part of his capital in this, right? So it's like, that's not a conservative outlook.
Right.
That's just basically, oh, here, this is like Scrooge McDuck with all the money, just keep giving us money for the lawsuit. I mean, we have to find where stop is. Like, you know what, okay, we fought it long and hard. But now it's kind of like, he's hurting, what have you. And it's like we have to draw back and just lick our wounds and keep going. But like I said, we want to hold a caucus convention system. We need to empower the delegates to be engaged in their community.
Right.
And that will, I don't care what, you can have the signature. Go get signatures, bro. I mean, and it was proven at the convention, right? Kennedy and Romney, it was proven that you don't get signatures all day. You might be going to the primary, but the people at the convention don't like you.
Right.
And that's where it is. Now, if we had the delegates in the community, now going into the primary, now it's like, okay, let's talk about this. This is why the information I got on Romney at the convention. This is what the information I got on Kennedy at the convention. What do you think? But the delegates have to remain impartial. That's the hard part, because this is a passionate thing. If you're a delegate, this is passionate because you're involved and you have the information, but you have to be impartial to what the people in your district want. Just like being a mayor, you got to be impartial to what the people want in your city, and you have to remain that way to get the input. But then in the end, it's still kind of your decision. They're like, okay, and just add up information and do it. And that's how we beat SB54. Yeah. That's exactly how we beat it.
All right. Well, I think we're probably good at that point.
You think so?
Yeah.
Hi, guys.
So we'll break it here.
All right.